Hi, my name is Liz with B.Willow, and today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make a mounted tropical. So right here we have a mounted staghorn fern, and this is a really great option in terms of type of plant to use for a mounted plant, just because its root system isn't going to be too deep, so it's going to be able to last living on this board setting for quite a long time. Great, so I'm going to set that down, and on the table, we have a variety of different tropicals, so another staghorn fern, we have a spider plant, we have various vining plants. So we love using vining plants for mounted planters because they're going to cascade down the wall, so it really gives you that beautiful, looks like living wall aesthetic. All right, so then we have our board, and we've already pre-drilled the board, so we've got screws kind of creating a circle, and this is basically going to be our area where we're going to be mounting your plant. And then on the back we have a couple screws and some thick wire to hang this on your wall. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is add a nice thin layer of soil to the bottom. And ideally you're kind of using your screws as a guideline. You don't really want your materials to go past that. But if it does for now, it's okay, because towards the end we'll kind of tap out any of the extra soil. So make a nice kind of even layer. And then you're gonna take your nursery pot and just kind of loosen like this, just to make it easier for the plant to fall out. I'm gonna pour out any extra soil. So you can see with this plant that the root system is fairly shallow. So it's still a good idea just to kind of get in there and loosen it up a little bit. Basically what you're doing is you're helping to aerate the root system, which is important so you don't have rotting happening. So situate your plant however you want. So just keep in mind, you know, the hanger is on the back side at the top here. So if you want to reposition your plant based on how you want it to look, it's obviously going to grow and change, but just something to keep in mind as you're starting. So then what you're going to do is take more soil and just add more all the way around. So in a sense, we're kind of repotting this plant by giving it a slightly bigger home to grow into. And if you find that your soil is dry, go ahead and grab a mister and just spritz all the way around. That'll just make it a little easier to work with. So just gently packing down. All right, we can set our soil aside. So now we're gonna move to our moss. So basically this is gonna act as our cover over top of our soil to hold everything together. So you're gonna wrap that around and push it through so that your screws poke through. That way it's easy for you to find them when you're gonna start tying this all together with invisible wire. All right, so next you're gonna take your invisible wire, and what I like to do is basically knot it onto one of your screws. Just kind of tie it around a couple times. And then tie a knot a couple times. This will give you a nice anchor. And it can be a little tricky, so just take your time. This is meant to be nice and relaxing, so there's no rush. All right, so got our invisible wire on. So basically now we're just going to do a series of crisscrosses between your screws all the way across in all these different directions, because that's really what's going to help keep everything together. And as you're doing this, if you find that you're seeing soil exposed, then you really do want to go in and just add a little bit more moss just to make sure you've got everything nicely kind of put together. So you can't really overdo this, but you just want to go through and do every possible combination. So just think diagonally, as well as kind of going around in a circle. And when you feel like you've exhausted kind of all of the different combinations, you can even like spin this around. That might be helpful too. If you feel like you've gone all the way around and you've done a decent job, you want to kind of pick up the entire thing and just gently, just not like shake it, but give it a little jostle like that, just to see if you notice anything that's really still super loose. So the great thing about these types of planters is that they're really breathable. So the moss is going to allow a lot of airflow to your soil and to your roots. And that is super important with your indoor plants. You know, we don't have wind, we don't have as much airflow in our homes unless you really are diligent about having good air circulation, which can often be difficult, you know, especially seasonally. In winter, you know, the air gets drier, so it's just really important to think about airflow with your indoor plants, and creating breathable homes for your plants to live is one way to kind of safeguard against rotting. So I'm feeling pretty good. So at this point, I'm just gonna maybe go around one more time. And what you're kind of noticing I'm doing too is I'm like pushing it down a little bit on the sides here and looping that as well, just to give it a little more stability. All right, so I'm gonna cut it with a decent amount of excess. So that I'm able to tie it off. So to tie it off, you can just go to another screw and just as tightly as possible tie a knot. And then you can kind of double knot it. And then simply trim that off. And at this point, you're noticing we have excess soil all around. So you're just gently gonna tap that out. And there we have it, all done. So pretty easy. So this is now a new skill you have, so you can do this to lots of different plants. So like we said, vining plants look really great. If you can imagine this starting to trail down, it looks really beautiful. And in order to care for these, it's also pretty simple. The best light condition is indirect but bright light. So in a room with a window, near the window. It doesn't necessarily have to be getting direct rays of sun. Most tropical plants indoors can kind of scorch or get really dry if they're getting hit directly by the sun. So in terms of watering, you're going to take your planter, go to your sink, or use a bucket, and you're just basically going to direct water over the moss portion. So thoroughly saturate all the way around. So once it's stopped dripping and your wood has definitely dried, you can rehang. So in order to know how often to water, typically these need about once a week watering, but it could be more than that, it could be less than that. It really just depends on the environment that you have them in. Signs that it needs watering would be that the leaves would just sort of start to thin and maybe droop a little bit. Also just the weight, you might get a sense that it's a little heavier after you've watered it, and it'll lighten up as it dries out. Thank you so much for watching our tutorial for how to make a mounted plant. If you guys have any questions, feel free to email us at plantcare@bwillow.com. Thank you.